welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today for this Case Teaching in the Age of AI webinar, From Faculty Fears to New Possibilities. This is the very first session in our new faculty development series called Case Teaching and Writing in the Age of AI. So we are very, very excited to have you with us. Across this series, you'll hear from a series of faculty members from around the world, from our own school, who are experimenting with AI in the classroom, and they will be sharing real examples, candid lessons, and practical strategies that you can apply immediately in your own classrooms. AI is rapidly changing the way that we teach. And for case classrooms, that brings both fears and new possibilities. You might be wondering, are students using AI as a shortcut? Are discussions currently losing their depth? How can I evaluate contributions now that make sure that they're fair? Well, to better understand where you stand, what your questions are, what your fears are, we conducted a pre-webinar survey a week ago or so. And that survey revealed, after over 100 responses, that your biggest fears are that students are using AI as a shortcut, but in a way that is raising academic integrity issues. And many of you also highlighted the difficulty of assessing students' contributions, along with concerns with the reduced depth of classroom discussions, as I just mentioned. Some of you also raised ethical considerations and biases in AI outputs, as well as faculty confidence in using AI tools. Well, based on that, we put together the discussion today, and we understand that you are both cautious and curious about AI, and that's why we wanted to open this webinar series and give you the opportunity to learn more and to just discuss more about it. Now, I'm very happy to introduce our speakers. First, we have Kyle Maclean, who is an assistant professor and teaching scholar at Ivey Business School. He was named by Poets and Quants as one of the 50 best undergraduate business professors in 2023. He also won the Western's Award for Innovation in Technology and Enhanced Teaching earlier this year. And he also received the Ivey's David G. HBA Teaching Award in 2018. He also serves as guest editor for different academic issues, academic publications, and on generative AI in teaching. And he will be sharing today some practical applications for your classroom. We also have Mazi, who's an assistant professor in strategy and a research fellow with the Innovation North Learning Lab at Ivey. His work focuses on how leaders and managers wrestle with complex challenges. He teaches strategy, systems thinking, and decision-making across Ivey's HBA, MBA, and MS programs. Thank you so much, Mazi, for joining us. Fun fact, his current research explores the impact of generative AI on management learning. So that's what he's here to share with us today, and we are very excited to have him. And guiding today's discussion is Violetta Gallagher. She's the associate director, now director of our publishing team here at Ivey Publishing. And she will be moderating the discussion and asking very interesting questions based on your insights from the survey that we conducted. Violetta, over to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Laura. And Kyle, Mazi, we are so excited to have you both here. We've really framed today's session as a conversation because these topics, classroom practice, grading, and ethics, are really deeply connected. We want to explore them together so that participants can see how both perspectives really complement each other. So let's get us started. Kyle, Mazi, what excites you most about the possibilities of AI brings to case teaching right now? And let's start with Kyle.
So I think I'm an optimist. So I want to think about what a case class might look like in the best case scenario. And I think the outcomes of a case class depend on two groups. The first is students and kind of the quality of preparation, the quality of students. And the second group is faculty. And you need both to have a kind of a successful case classroom. If either one isn't to the correct level, it's not going to work. And that's the kind of balancing rope that we need to kind of do here to have it's very scary. A lecture is very easy. You just need faculty kind of do well for that to work. But with a case classroom, you need both sides to work. So the question is, how does AI change that? And I think it changes it, again, in the best case scenario, you have students that are more prepared, and you have faculty that are more prepared. And you have faculty that are better prepared with kind of timely examples and better ways of teaching. And so if you have both sides that are that much more prepared, even if it's just a marginal level of preparedness, I think you'll see an exponential kind of boost to the quality of a case classroom. Because to me, it's a multiplicative effect. If either side doesn't work, it's a zero and you kind of get to a zero outcome of learning. But if both sides are just that much better off, you're going to see a huge improvement to the depth of discussion in a case classroom. So to me, that's the best case scenario is you still have case teaching, but it's a more in-depth discussion because of AI.
Can't agree more. And out of that, preparedness is key to a great classroom discussion. So Mazi, what excites you most about the possibilities of what AI brings to case teaching right now?
Thank you. Hi, Violeta. Hi, everyone. I love what Kyle said. I totally agree with him. What excites me the most is that it's as an instructor, as a faculty, as a teacher in the classroom, it's constantly keeping me awake. So I'm no longer bored with what I do. I was never bored, but I'm actually a lot more excited because every time I look at what I've been doing, I have to think very carefully how I'm going to do this differently this time. I have a hunch that in a few weeks, well, maybe not a few weeks, but in a few months, we're going to look back at this webinar and we're all going to roll our eyes and say, oh my God, that was so old. That's the excitement of AI, is that it's changing so rapidly. And I think I love the fact that both the students and the instructors are constantly learning new ways of learning. And it's getting us back to the very foundations of why are we doing this and why are we having students together in a classroom and why are we even doing case studies. It is getting us to think very carefully about why we're together in a classroom. And that's what excites me the most.
I can't agree anymore that rapid learning, that rapid change is so different from, years ago when we were in a classroom and looking at textbooks even. So let's get a little bit more concrete. Kyle, you've already been experimenting with AI tools in your teaching. Can you share a few examples that have worked particularly well in your classroom?
Yeah, and I think to Mazi's point, which is very well stated, things move so quickly. I think a couple of these are already, perhaps it's like, oh, you just did that, you could have done so much more. And it's because of, in a couple months, things have shifted. But I'll share a couple of examples. So I have an elective course here at Ivey. And historically, in that elective course, I had students do a long-term research project. So it was a term-long research project. And it was a group research project. Historically, I would have students have a couple checkpoints. They would meet with me for 20 minutes at a time throughout the semester. And there was like 4 staged meetings. And we talk about the research question, the data they had. But I would end up spending so much time on these because I'm having it with every single team for 20 minutes times 4 times a semester. It worked really well. I think it was helpful to them, but it doesn't scale very well. So earlier this year, what I did was I kind of flipped it a little bit. So what I did was I created a custom GPT and I shared that with students for each checkpoint. And so the custom GPT was prompted with what I knew the students oftentimes would struggle with. So I'd say, here's what they oftentimes struggle with in this scenario. And so what they do, I think we're sharing a slide right now. It says the students would have a conversation with the GPT. They'd ask a question and say, here's what we're currently planning on doing. And the custom GPT would act as me. After that, and so they'd have a mini conversation. After that, the students would submit that conversation to me and I would review it. And so it's really important. The human is still in the loop. I wasn't totally removed from this project, but I could spend more time on complex issues and kind of complex questions rather than stuff that 99% of groups are struggling with. So it just enabled me to spend my time a little bit more effectively. And the students, I got feedback that the students appreciated being able to kind of have this multiple times rather than only doing it once with me and kind of being nervous about it. They could stage it and kind of have this conversation whenever they wanted with the GPT. So the students also appreciated it. And of course, they appreciated that I was still in the loop. I wasn't totally removed. More recently, so over the summer, what I've developed is something I'll call a news widget for our course homepage. So I've always liked the idea of relating your course to current events. And I think cases are that, right? But I do it for also just like news that happened yesterday or today. And I say, hey, here's something going on in the news. Here's how it relates to our course. So the problem with that is obviously, again, does it scale that every day I go out and I create new slides? No, not really. And so what this widget does is with a couple different LLMs, it finds a daily news article and then it writes how it relates to our course. So it is prompted with what our course objectives are. And it tells students, here's something that happened in the news. And we've got a screenshot up. So it says, here's a headline. It summarizes that headline. And then it says, I think it says analytics insights. So it says, here's how this relates to, I teach analytics. Here's how this relates to analytics in some way. And here's how you can view it through the lens of this course. And I think the benefit is now students can a little bit more readily accept how our course is relevant to stuff they see every day in the news. The other thing is it gives me an activity to do during class. So if I have like 3 minutes at the end of a case class, before I perhaps wouldn't know what to do with that time, now I can quickly, without any preparation, I just say, let's look at the news. And I basically go over this news widget and it's pre-made material for me that is constantly updating. And in case anybody's curious, this is like a penny a day. So it very, very cheap, but it's readily made, it's ready material for me to do.
That's wonderful, Kyle. Thanks for sharing those examples and really thinking about how you can have deeper, richer conversations, being timely, as you said in this news article, and that accessibility, even that penny a day is definitely a part of that accessibility. So Mazi, how do you see those examples connecting to the broader goals of case teaching and decision-based learning?
I so want to take Kyle's elective course. It sounds very interesting. I hope you have a spot for me, Kyle. This is a really good question. I think if we take a couple of steps back and ask ourselves the question of why do we even use the case method in learning, I think we can come to the conclusion. At least this is the conclusion that I've made, so maybe others will agree or disagree with me, is that there are three reasons we do that. One of them, cases are a really good way for the entire class to arrive at some basic conceptual understanding of a topic, right? For instance, if it is a course in statistics, you can get at like the foundations of statistics going. You can go a step further and you can get people to practice very specific skills. An example is that running regressions. If it is in Kyle's world, Kyle is in the management science and decision making with analytics world. I'm in the strategy world. So my example would be someone practicing how to run a value chain analysis on a certain company or a certain industry. The third reason, and I think this is where we ultimately try to get to, is how do we sharpen our students' practical wisdom or the judgment or the nuance in decision making. You and I were having this conversation a little earlier about the cases, how the core decision in the case is a very interesting dilemma that it doesn't easily lend to a quick answer, we should do A versus B. It requires some analysis. All three of these domains of knowledge, all three of these reasons we use cases, AI can both disturb them and can also enhance them. And maybe this is something that we need to be a bit careful about, is that how do we use AI very productively, very generatively in enhancing these skills, right? For instance, if we're thinking about conceptual knowledge, can we create opportunities for subtle errors to be in the text and asking the students to detect this? We can use AI to generate these things very, very, very quickly, right? It's a lot less costly for us to produce these sharp, quick little assignments as we go through it. Or in the case of the practicing the skills, AI can be. This is what Kyle was doing. Kyle was acting as a mentor through the custom ChatGPT, right? We can actually create opportunities for AI to be the mentor, to be the one who coaches and the one who practices negotiation with the students and all that. The practical wisdom part, this is where I think that we could also be very creative around using AI to offer us all the views or perspectives that are not currently available in the classroom. It could be the voice that is missing. It could be the adversarial voice that is necessary. It could be the supplementary perspective that many people don't get to. So there are lots of opportunities to deepen and enrich our classroom conversations with AI. The trick is leaning into these experiments and not being afraid of failing the first couple of times and redoing them. We won't get it right the first couple of times, but with practice, we and the students become better at using this. I hope that's answered your question, Violetta.
It definitely does. And as I was listening, there's really this notion around practical skills that we're gaining here. This ability to act as a mentor, the AI acting as a mentor here. But then we have our own faculty that are teaching in the classrooms that are acting as mentors. Again, this deep and rich, and I think we're going to continue to hear that throughout. And then what I really caught on at the very end there, Mazi, for me was that vulnerability. Right? There's a sense of vulnerability when using AI in the classroom, not just you as faculty and bringing it in, but students as well. That it's okay to make those mistakes. So I think it's great.
I think this is a really critical point that you're raising, Violetta, because let's just rewind for quickly what I said. I don't want to repeat it, but just rewind in your head. Almost everything that I said may suggest that we don't need a classroom anymore. A student can't do this alone with AI. So why do we come together in the classroom, right? But what you're proposing is precisely the necessary condition here, which is that in a social setting, how students become vulnerable, how faculty and students both are vulnerable with one another, it enhances a very important skill, which is how do we continue being social creatures? And managers are not, like little tools in the corner of an organization. We're very much embedded in all parts of the organization. And we need to enhance those very important social skills. And that's where the classroom setting is incredibly important. You cannot bypass the classroom setting. That's what Mazi would say.
Can't agree anymore. And I see Kyle in the background also agreeing and nodding. So absolutely. So let's turn to assignments. We're going to stay with you, Mazi. How do you design assignments that leverage AI without letting it become just a shortcut for students?
Yeah, this is a multi-million-dollar question. I think this is where everyone is struggling with. And this is where we see a lot of it seeps into academic integrity conversations and ethics as well. I think assignments have a few purposes. One purpose is to give the students a feedback of how they're learning. So assignments is an opportunity for the students to verify that what I've picked up is actually working, right? And then the second reason for an assignment is to verify how, as an instructor, I am actually doing well in the classroom. Are students learning what I want them to? Like, am I meeting my objectives in the classroom as well? So it gives me feedback, right? I think there's a brutal reality here is that if we do not see the work that the students is performing in front of our eyes, which is that if it's not proctored, if it's not in front of our eyes, then I will not be able to very faithfully trust the output that was the student's output. It's very possible that the student did it themselves, but also highly possible that the student must have used generative AI in the process. Whether for editing reasons or for production reasons, I can't tell. And that's precisely the problem. So one of the great ways of getting out of this is figuring out multiple efficient opportunities for oral exams. And this is one of the reasons that Kyle has actually put up this slide. Kyle, I'd love for you to tell us what it is that you and your colleagues discovered with how to use oral exams as a way of defending the process of assignment and verifying that the students have learned, and you also get feedback that, yes, the students are coming along.
Yeah, so this was a project, actually, it was designed for academic integrity issues, but believe it or not, this project originated in 2020 when most of us moved online, and all of a sudden I wasn't sure when students were doing things online, if they were communicating with others or if they were looking things up. There was just so limited tools to kind of verify any of that. And so we kind of went back to a team of us went back to basics, and we said, what would be like an ideal assessment? And if we had no constraints, an ideal assessment to us was an oral exam. You can probe questions, you can ask students to explain their reasoning. Lots and lots of nice things are done with oral exams. The problem, of course, when you add these constraints back in, is that it doesn't scale to hundreds of students. So to me, there's even without AI, there's usually some sort of trade-off between assessing higher order thinking skills and the scalability of an assessment. If I have a classroom of one student, I need to assess them. That is very easy. Again, I will just have a discussion with them for an hour, and I will know so well how much they know. But that doesn't scale to hundreds of students. So we developed an approach, and the slide was kind of showing, we wrote a paper. So if you Google the paper, you'll find it. But we did an approach where students did an automated oral exam that ran in parallel. And so this had, it was not as good as a one-on-one kind of true oral exam, but what it allowed is that we would post a question and all the students in parallel would answer that on their video cameras, essentially. And so recently this has gotten, it's funny, we developed it for 2020. Recently, it's been kind of renewed, this discussion, for a very different purpose. Instead of everybody being online, it's now ChatGPT and AI. But I think thinking through how do we scale higher order thinking is broader than just this exact form of assessment. And I think we do need more innovation in this sector. But this is just one approach that we came up with, which was on any learning management system. Presumably people could offer this. We ran it on Canvas, but presumably anyone could. So back to you, Mazi.
Yeah, Kyle, I mean, I think you're raising an incredibly important point, which is that some of these quote unquote solutions that we may come up with are not necessarily scalable or feasible for that matter. Like, I mean, many instructors are so busy teaching so many courses that we don't have extra time to run these oral exams. Students don't have extra time. In many instances, students actually have to rush to have their afternoon jobs or night jobs to be able to pay for that education. We get that, right? So you're right. We need to figure out ways of innovating around this. One way that I have seen, so the way that I described to you, it's called a defensive approach to assessment. A defensive approach is that you keep AI out and then you completely sanitize the whole process without generative AI, and then you return to a past approach that requires a person to improvisationally give you an answer to a question that you're asking them, verify their learning. There's another way. And this is the way that I think opportunity for a lot of innovation, which is that how do we lean into the fact that students do use AI in that process? And one way to do it is that move away from assessing an output of the student, that a report that they produced or an answer to the question that they gave, in verifying the process they went in producing that, right? So you may want to ask them, what was your process like? And they ask them to demonstrate that. What assumptions did you take on early steps? How did your assumptions change and evolve as you went through the analysis, right? What are some of the things that surprised you along the way? Where did you find yourself resisting in learning? So you can ask some of these questions. Notice, Kyle, everything that I'm proposing is, to your very good point, it's a metacognitive skill, right, along the way. So how do we design assessments that verify the process? Verify is a strong word. It asks the students to express the process. What becomes really interesting is that even if the students uses AI all the way through, they still have to actually ask themselves a question: what are my assumptions? Or ask our friendly AI, what were your assumptions? It is still learning at that moment, right? Not perfect, but there are ways of doing that. I would propose being very mindful of what the intention of the classroom is, and having one of maybe combination of these. Let me end here, and I'll give it back to you. A very wise person just very recently reminded me that classroom dialogue and classroom contribution is an oral exam. It's a series of micro oral moments, right? Mm-hmm. So lean into that as well, and then use that opportunity to verify and build on the students' learning in the classroom.
I can't agree more. And I think really what we want to ensure is that students are not just the consumers of generated content, but as you said there, Mazi, they're active decision makers and they're critical thinkers in this. Bringing it a little bit back to what you had shared around the paper there, Kyle, what other new approaches to grading are emerging that you find promising?
Good question. So I do want to highlight something Mazi said about contribution being a feedback opportunity. I have students every year, like right now we're in the middle of the semester, we're just about to have the midterm, and the students say, I haven't gotten any feedback from you. I don't know how I'm doing because we just have the midterm coming up. And I say, well, every day we speak in class. Every day you're saying something and I'm responding and we're collectively learning. I think as a faculty member, this is perhaps a little bit divorced from the AI, but do not dismiss kind of class contribution or class participation. That is everyday feedback to the student. And that is every day you are giving them feedback on how well they are doing and whether they understand the course concepts. So that's always been my response to students on that issue. Okay, so more broadly, I think there's a lot of opportunities in AI and assessments and grading. I think if we think about the term AI grading, I think there's a lot of negativity attached to it that's not necessary, because I think sometimes people fight, right, for either AI grading or for human grading. And sometimes there's this implicit assumption that it is a dichotomy, that you have to choose one or the other. And to me, that adds emotion to this when you don't have to choose one or the other. It can be both. And what's that mean? I think in the near term, AI is going to be a wonderful quality assurance check or quality control check. Let's put it that way. Right now, or before, let's say, if I had 780 exams that I needed to grade, I would have to hire graders. And graders would go through those exams, and to verify myself, what I would do is I would sample. Maybe I'd sample the lowest grade, the highest grade, a couple in between, but I'd essentially randomly sample. And I'd convince myself that this grader did a good job. What has changed with AI is, for a very small amount of money, I can have AI do another pass. I still have the human grader. Nothing has changed there. I can have AI do another pass of the grades and identify for me which of these exams should I look at that might be very different from the rubric or whatever. And so rather than randomly sampling and saying, here's where I should direct my attention, AI is telling me how I should spend my limited time and say, hey, here are the exams that deserve your attention. So again, it's leveraging my time. It's not that AI is replacing my time. It's that I'm still using the same amount of time, but I am focused on exams that need that time. So it's not that AI is grading, but it's that AI is acting as a secondary kind of quality assurance measure that, hey, I'm super confident in my grades. So I would encourage, folks listening more and more to not view it as human grading or AI grading, but you can have, well, I think that's even better, is if you have both still in the loop, but directing attention as necessary, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. And there's a human bias to grading as well, right? And so that quality assurance with the AI check is, as you said, it's that next level of then leveraging where you should best spend your time, as you said.
Yeah. And I think, so you bring up human bias, which is great, because I think the classic counter argument is people say, well, AI hallucinates and AI isn't right 100% of the time. And that's completely true. But if you have a very tired TA at the end of 12 hours of marking, are they exactly the same as they were at the first? Are they 100% correct? No, I mean, we hope, but that's why we have to have samples and we check and we double check and triple check. And so if you have two systems that have independent errors, I'm getting a little bit mathematical now, but if you have two systems that have independent errors, hopefully those errors will cancel each other out. And that's why you need both kind of checks. So I think in the near term, we should open ourselves up to having an AI quality assurance check of our grading, just to double check we haven't missed anything.
That's great. And Mazi, to build on that, and I know you wanted to jump in there with Kyle as well, but if you could add a little bit around how are faculty rethinking rubrics and evaluation criteria to adapt AI in the classroom?
Yeah. This is a really important point. You're right, but you were correct that I wanted to jump in. That Kyle said, he's so smart. There's a nuance we have to be very careful about, which is that management education is not always a solid black and white science, that you always have the right answer or the wrong answer. Like 2 + 2 is 4 in mathematics, right? In elementary arithmetics, at least. But in management, there are moments of creativity, and we do encourage that. We do want managers to solve problems, not always in the heuristic that we tell them, but sometimes even step aside and be creative in the problem solving or in the judgment or decision making, all that. Our rubrics, if they are very solid rubrics of pass through the filter and then I give you high grade, and if you don't pass through the filter, I give you a low grade, they will essentially, this is what Kyle, you were saying, that they will, there are some individuals, some students who, if they're creative in their approach, the rubric will break on them. right? And then they get penalized in the traditional fashion, right? This is where the AI can actually be quite useful. As you said, Kyle, run through a very pass through all of the exams and say, hey, these exams will probably have difficulty going through your rubric. So for the very first thing you can do is that you can improve your rubric. Because I have an idea of how the case is going to be analyzed from top to bottom, and I can probably, based on my experiences, say what a great exam can look like. But I bet if I actually listen to my students, they have very good ideas of how that exam can be answered as well. And I didn't think about it in advance, so I can use AI to improve my rubric to begin with. And then everything else that you both talked about is going to be very, very important in that process. Now, rubrics. In my mind, rubrics come into maybe 3 or 4 categories. There's a category that you have a checklist rubric. Okay? If the student said this, give them 3 marks. If they didn't say it, subtract 2 marks, whatever. And then you have this, another layer is the expression of the creativity of the students, is that how well did they solve this problem? Like, did they get to the output ignoring the process? Did they get to the output? Yes or no, and then you grade them based on that, right? So you verify for the creative output of the students. The third method is as a process-oriented. A little earlier, I was trying to tell you that how we could design classes or assessment to verify the process of learning. And that becomes, the rubric that focuses on the metacognitive reflection and these reasoning pathways that the students go through. So when you look at an exam, instead of saying how well do they apply the framework, you can ask for how logical or internally consistent was the report. You can ask for how well was the report set up and laid out that it influenced or can influence someone's thinking. Because what we do in management world is not just simply solving a problem, we also need to convince others to come our way. Mm-hmm. We need to influence them because we work in organizations, we're not solitary creatures. So how well would it influence others, right? How well has it considered its own rebuttals in its own answers, right? How well is the student deploying evidence for strengthening the claims? So that becomes the third way of, I call this process-oriented rubric creation, right? A little conventional, a little different than conventional approaches that we do. It requires a little bit more creativity, but faculty can actually use AI to develop these rubrics, and then assessments become everything that we just talked about.
Thanks, Mazi. So from simple checklists to expression creativity, and then this process, but really all in all, it's social at the end, right? And it brings back to that, what we had said at the very start. So before we hear a little bit more from Mazi and Kyle on the when and how, I want to put in an if scenario on the table. So if AI is even allowed in the classroom, what does that mean for faculty? Each institution has a different perspective and different use cases, and I know we're all coming in from different parts of the world here. And some encourage AI integration, others restrict it heavily. So before deciding when and how to use AI, we do need to ask if it fits within our own teaching context. So that's why these conversations matter so much. So one of the unique elements of case teaching is participation. Kyle, how should we think about grading participation when students may arrive with AI-generated insights?
And I love this idea about when should AI be used, or as you said, if it should be used. I think I always think about what changes. So historically, I've told students that there are 3 levels of case preparation, and therefore 3 levels of learning. They first should prep the case themselves, and they learn by doing that. They absolutely learn just by prepping the case themselves, but they don't learn a lot. They kind of, after an hour, there's diminishing marginal returns. Then ideally, they meet with a smaller team. At Ivey, we call these learning teams, but they could be any type of smaller group. They ask their friends, hey, what did you do? What did you do? So they get even more insight, and they make sure they haven't missed anything. Then they come to class. So at this point, they've talked with a couple other people. And then with a class and a faculty member guided discussion, they learn even more. But at each one of these points, they're learning more than the previous bit. I think now with AI, so I don't think AI should be used in the classroom, while the conversation is going on. I think what ends up happening is, and I've had a couple of these instances where a student will just essentially read whatever ChatGPT said, and it's not necessarily relevant to the conversation. It's just, and you don't even know what to do with that comment because it's super wordy. It's very awkward. So I don't allow AI during a case discussion. I encourage it before the case discussion. However, in a very specific way. It is not, give me the answer to this case. What it is still do the individual prep by yourself, no AI. There's now 4 levels. The second level is going to the AI and asking, is there anything I have missed here? Or what are the implicit assumptions I am making that I'm not aware of? Or is there anything I haven't considered? To me, this is a stress test of your analysis. And it's exactly what your learning team might do, or what they should be doing. But it's just another version of that. And and then you go to your learning team. So you still have your learning team. But the nice thing about an AI is obviously a bit quicker to do that. And it's on demand. So you do it yourself, prep that case. Then you ask, what have I missed? What are my implicit assumptions I'm making, et cetera, et cetera. So you gain more that way. Then you go to the learning team. Then you go to class. So it's a 4-level stage in learning. And I think going back to the first question is, what am I excited about? I think that will lead to more prepared students when they prepare that way.
Absolutely. So prep, talk about misses, then you've got your student teams and your classroom conversation again. And Mazi, how can AI help students go beyond surface level answers and actually spark richer debate in a class discussion?
Obviously, I'm going to return to what I said at the top of this dialogue, which is that everything is changing so rapidly. So the answer that I'm sharing with you is what I experienced in the last few weeks. So all of this will change, right? I would start by answering the question a little differently. I would ask the question, like, how can professors and faculty prepare for class differently? Many of us, when we were so busy, so we've taught the case before, so we have some teaching notes around it, or we reach out to our lovely friends at Ivey Publishing and get the teaching notes of that case. I think we need to learn to go beyond that. I think AI will do a phenomenally great job at the first pass of analyzing the case, and I think we need to be very ready to go beyond what the bounds of the teaching notes were, or the bounds of the case, and it becomes a little bit of an improvisation in the classroom. So here's what we could do: we could very quickly, in the first 20 minutes of the classroom, surface what everyone knows, whether it is someone who is parroting what their ChatGPT told them last night. I mean, Caldas was your example, or someone who was a little bit more diligent in learning with. I'm going to use ChatGPT. I mean, many people use other tools, but with generative AI, and it's coming not just simply presenting the output, but has some thoughts around it. Regardless, in the first 20 minutes, we can actually get the basis of the case out on the table. I would, in that moment, flip the question. I would alter the case conversations in a way that no one had prepared it. Right? I'll give an example. If there is a protagonist in the case, there's this company that is going to think about marching into a new territory, or for instance, or launching a new product, for instance. Everyone has analyzed that. I would pivot the case in that moment and ask the question from a point of view of the customer base, for the point of view of a competitor. Now make the case about someone else. The case becomes an excuse to have deeper conversations, not the goal to have the conversations on that case. This is a very different use of case-based learning and what is really produced. This way, it forces the students and the faculty to be very fluid in their analysis, as opposed to presenting recorded answers or created answers. This is the way I've tried it recently. Students don't like it because they feel they've been caught off guard, but they overcome that, and then it goes forward. I would admit that it has doubled or maybe even tripled my prep time for a class. Yeah.
So going from Kyle's preps and misses and that student prep to now challenging faculty to go beyond and prep. So before we close, and I'm very conscious of the time and we want to leave time for questions and answers, really quickly, let's give faculty who are just starting out with something practical. Kyle, in a few words, what's a safe first step for experimenting with AI in your next course?
Yeah, just keep it simple. So don't even use it for anything student facing, because that does introduce extra challenges. Just use it for your own teaching. So when you have something in class that you know is going to be difficult to explain, either a theory or a tricky case factor, we oftentimes know here's something that's going to be difficult. Have a conversation with your favorite LLM and ask it for an analogy or ask it how to explain it to students. And not every time it comes up with a great analogy, but I'd say 40% of the time it comes up with a nice analogy that I'm like, okay, I could actually teach that in class. And so it's just a minor improvement. Students don't know that you used it, but translating kind of complicated teaching scenarios into something simple to explain to students is how I use it quite a bit.
I love that. Keep it simple. Mazi, in a short little period, how about you? What's one safe way faculty can start?
I love that note, short period. I go on, don't I? Be vulnerable. And also let the students know that you're experimenting with these. Let the students know that you're also learning along the way. This is new for everyone. And it doesn't make sense to show up in front of a classroom and say, I'm the master of AI. No, let them know that you're also, it's a journey everyone's on.
So simple and vulnerable. Thank you, Kyle and Mazi, for sharing such insightful perspectives. It's clear that AI presents both opportunities and challenges, but as we've heard, it can also enrich class teaching in powerful ways when used thoughtfully. So I'll hand it over to Laura for questions.
Thank you, Violetta, and thank you, Mazi and Kyle, for your insights. As Mazi just said, it's a journey. We're all on it, and we're all learning together. So now we're gonna move on to the questions. We will try to answer most of them, but the ones that we don't get to, you will receive answers on our follow-up email. And also, you can reach out to Mazi or Kyle over social media. We will leave their handles for LinkedIn. They have agreed to continue the conversation there. Great. First question, and feel free to answer Mazi or Kyle or Violetta, whoever thinks that this question will fit them best. How do you ensure students critically engage with the GPT that I give them rather than be satisfied with the first answer? I am all for being in the loop, but how do you keep human effort low while checking their engagement low?
Can I take a stab at this and see if anyone else wants to jump on? This is a really, really, really important point that we're raising, because we also have to think about what the effect of generative AI is out of society, not just only in the classroom, right? I see generative AI as a lovely tool, but also has some challenges and threats to our society. One is that it's always there, it always answers your question, and it always aims to satisfy you, right? Even, have you noticed when you ask it a question like, well, how about this? It comes back with, oh, what a lovely question that you asked me. That is very smart, brilliant, you caught me. You know, it has this tendency of satisfying you really quickly and making you think that you're very super intelligent. All of us are, but I think we should be very cautious about recognizing that feature of it and not falling into the trap of it. There's a lovely study. I can post it on the chat, and it's very recent, on the notion of metacognitive laziness. Yeah, we're getting lazy in pursuing our own assumptions, pursuing our own understanding of this thing, right? If we know that, then we have to work against our own laziness along the way. That's my quick answer to very good. That's a very good question, Laura.
Absolutely, it is. There's another question that connects very well with that one, and it talks about how can we really tell if students are genuinely interested in learning rather than just chasing grades with minimal effort. It is clear from research that students' engagement is declining, and the rise of AI tools seems to be making that even worse. I'd love to hear your thoughts, especially based on your own experience working with students or in education in general.
I mean, in my opinion, I'm not sure it's making it worse. I think there's always a distribution of, let's say, intrinsic interest in learning. And I think some students are very interested. Some students view education as a certificate type thing. What it has done is it has allowed, at least in the short term here, for the students who aren't interested to perhaps not engage as much as in the past. So to me, I I mean, this isn't my research, but I don't think there's been necessarily a change in the distribution of engagement per se. But what it has done is the lower end of engagement is it's easier for them to skate by, let's say. But again, I'm an optimist. I focus on students who are really interested. Just yesterday, a student came to me and they said, I made a dynamic pricing model in Python and a dashboard, and they did this all for an interview. And they didn't know Python. They didn't know any programming languages. They did this all through natural language with an LLM. And so at the top, the students who are interested, and that's usually where I focus my attention, the students who are interested and want to go beyond the course and they really do want to learn, it's enabled them to do things that are just remarkable, that 5 years ago, they would have needed 5 other courses to get to where they're going now. So sometimes I think we focus too much of our emotional energy on the students who aren't engaged, and I'll let them. I'll design assessments that perhaps will challenge those students. But for the students who are interested, it's enabled just incredible opportunity. So that's how I view this.
Kyle, you just mentioned other language models, and there's a question goes around there. Says, besides custom GPT and the popular Chat GPT, are there other specific AI tools you recommend that can be useful in facilitating case teaching and learning in any and do you have any specific examples and strategies that have worked with such tools?
I mean, there's so many different LLMs, Anthropic and Claude. I'm blanking out. So there's so many. What I will say is that's been a pet peeve of mine, actually. Sometimes people talk about AI and they say, AI says this. And I'm like, the models do differ. So it's very important to realize the models do differ. And if you just tell me AI has a stupid answer, my first question would be, what model are you using? Even ChatGPT. I mean, let's just limit it to that. There's GPT-5 Auto, which oftentimes has a low reasoning effort. There's GPT-5 Thinking, which has more. There's GPT-5 Pro. All of these things will have extremely different quality of answers. So we should be aware of the different models that we're using from the different providers. One thing I do want to point out, back to the assessment issue, is more and more there are very high quality local large language models. And what I mean by that is ChatGPT is a website or an app or something, and you are using their servers to produce a response. More and more, there's very high quality local ones that will run on let's say a high powered laptop, but still a consumer level laptop that does not need the internet. And the reason I'm bringing that up is because sometimes when people are designing assessments, they assume that if they shut off the internet, that students won't be able to access any large language model. More and more, that is not the case. They will be able to access local large language models that perhaps are not state of the art, but they are still pretty good. So I just want people to be aware. I think it's a great question of what are the possibilities out there? Some are local that are just, you're never sending your data anywhere. You just run it on your own laptop. Others are obviously centralized, OpenAI, Anthropic, those kinds of ones. Sorry, that was a bit of a tangent, but.
Thank you so much, Kyle. Let's go back to student engagement for a bit. Mazi, you have further insights.
I think I do, if you don't mind. One thing I'm noticing is that when generative AI has entered our world, it's causing us to question what are we doing in the classroom and what education is like. And I started that on the top of the dialogue, but I think it's a really great moment to remind students about what learning is like, right? So although in the business school, although in education, we teach them topics and concepts like statistics and strategies and finance and all that, I actually think this is a great opportunity for us to remind them a literacy about learning, how one learns, right? So as educators, I think our job is also to help them know how to learn. A colleague of mine at Ivey has just recently started a course called The Not Yet Finished Business of Being Human. And the whole job of that course is to remind students that they're learning creatures and what it means to be vulnerable in this learning process. So we have to do a little bit more work to get students engaged, but opportunities are plenty.
Thank you. That's very insightful. Now let's go a little bit technical here. There's a question about how can we use AI to create a business simulation class activity? I tried, but I still need suggestions.
Ooh, I have a lot of suggestions for that. So a simulation?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is going to be a deeper. So the good news is, as I said, my student who just doesn't know anything about Python managed to create a dashboard about dynamic pricing. Faculty, that's true too. If you don't know much about programming, this is a fantastic time to start because you can get really, really, really far with relatively little programming background. And as the students, if you say, I don't know anything about programming, I would suggest to you, that's a great place for LLMs. Copy text, copy little programming snippets and say, what's going on here? You can teach yourself relatively quickly that way. There's a platform, I'm not involved, so this is not a paid mention or anything, but there's a platform called Replit that I use. And the nice thing about them is they both host as well as have their own agents. So I think they have a free version and like a $20 a month version. But Replit is great for developing simulations because, again, they host it as well as have an agent. So you can have an agent and describe your simulation, and it will get pretty far with just that. And again, for a pretty small amount of money. So I've developed a lot of custom simulations that before would take me all summer to do, and now I can spin them up very, very rapidly. And I think the students appreciate that.
Another process that participants are curious about, somebody says, I have used Copilot to summarize cases from course textbooks and modify the case with alternative industries and details. Are there other best practices you would recommend and tips for building prompts to support this process?
I mean, I have an opinion. I'm talking too much. So my opinion on this one is, I guess, really the question is how to write a good case. I think, believe it or not, because it's easy to change an industry or whatever. But to me, the best cases are, if we go back to what makes something engaging, it is a narrative structure with tension, right? If we just go back to like what makes a novel interesting, it's tension, it's narrative structure of, oh, this person is scared about losing their job or they're scared about this. So whenever I write a case, and if you look at the case I've written, there's always emotion there. So I would say, don't just say this company has $5 million in revenue and blah, blah, blah. Add emotion. So add a character, add a protagonist that says, hey, they might lose their job if this doesn't work, or they are worried about blah, blah, blah. The moment you add emotion to something, you are making your story more compelling and more engaging for students. I always start off a case and I say, who are we? And then I say, why does this matter to them? And sometimes you say, oh, we're a CEO. And I say, why does this matter to them? Well, maybe they, think to yourself, if you have all these employees' families depending on you, what happens if your company goes under? Like that is a major personal stressor. And it's not just the company, it's all of these families that depend on this company existing. But if you make it personal like that and you add the emotion to it, it's going to be that much better of a case than just the facts.
And just from a publisher's perspective, Kyle, that really is that, that action trigger that we always talk about in the cases. So can't agree more around that. But when thinking about just taking cases and adding them onto an LLM or OpenAI, just be mindful of the IP that's and who holds that copyright. Because those are definitely not best practices in regards to, putting what's not yours into a LLM or.
Oh yeah, so they were referring. Sorry, when I meant they said a textbook case, so I was imagining a very short paragraph of Apple introducing iPhone. But yeah, don't take a 5-page case and change a name. Don't do that. Yes.
Don't do that. That's not best practices.
I also want to add to this one, in addition to what both of you said, a good case cannot be summarized. It refuses to be summarized in a way. I mean, this is the tension that you're talking about, Kyle. That that every element of the case is used for a reason. So if you summarize it, you've essentially missed out on it. Cases are not tweets, and they're very different for that reason.
We have another question here. Do you have any advice for older professors finding it difficult to navigate the new and emerging AI landscape, please? Who wants to dive into this one?
Can you maybe repeat the question one more time, Laura?
Yes. Advice for older professors finding it difficult to navigate the new and emerging AI landscape.
Lean on your students. Maybe ask a student to introduce the case in the classroom. You know the knowledge domain very well. You know the class dynamic very well, and that's where your strength is. Invite the students to bring in the tool in the classroom. The trick is to make that tool another student in the classroom, but not another professor in the classroom, right? And when you do that, then you can actually just say, here's what this person is saying. And you can actually continue running your dialogue with one of your students who's very tech savvy, for instance, um, and then you don't have to become a deep expert of it. You still are the master of running class conversations. Lean into that.
And I think this also brings back to the piece of advice, Kyle and Mazi, that you said, keep it simple, start small, and be vulnerable. Like, let them know that you are newer to this.
Great, thank you so much. We have another question about, can you share any case teaching method in classroom where we can use both AI and authentic assessments simultaneously?
So what do you mean by case? Well, okay, I guess so case teaching method. What do you mean by that? Maybe this is an open question to our group.
I think so. It's, yeah, very likely I can approach case teaching approach where we can use both AI and assessments, authentic assessments simultaneously. That's what I'm getting from that.
I've done something that may fit in this example. It was quite recent in August. It was a class conversation that started with a very simple case, and we went 5-10 minutes into it, and then we actually used AI to give us alternative perspectives. And when looked at the output that it provided us, I kept it on screen, and then no other technology in the classroom. I asked students to read it, and then in that moment, write the reaction to how they liked, disliked, what were some of the reasons, what were some of the assumptions, what were some of the logical fallacies in the output that the AI had produced, right? And then I collected those as almost like rapid quizzes, if you will. So there are ways that you can do these things. These will take us into questions around fairness and equity and accommodations. Not every student is really good at thinking on the spot and reading on the screen and all that. So if you're mindful about those things, you can be creative in using the tool and assessment simultaneously.
Very well, thank you. There's another question, and we only have time for 2 more questions. How do you get AI to review an exam? Any tips?
Mazi, I know, has experience with this.
Yeah, tip number 1, remove any student identification from that exam. Absolutely, you do not want your AI, whether it's local or global, as Carl talking about, to have any sense of who's written that. You can upload them, but you need to prompt it very carefully. What is it that you want it to review? You want to review its flow. You want to review its completeness. You want to review its logic or rationale. Be very, very good at developing your prompt. And your prompt, I'm going to give you a hint. Your prompt is probably going to be about 4 or 5 paragraphs when you're reviewing that. There are lots of good websites out there that they help you engineer these prompts and give you the context of it. Tell AI what kind of a grader or what kind of an assessor you want to be. Are you hard? Are you soft? Are you developmental? Are you good with feedback? You need to give it persona and character, and also tell it what course it is, and the reason that you even thought about this exam. Let AI know why you chose that case for that exam. There's a lot more, but I'm going to stop.
Yeah, I know there's a lot more. There's a lot more insights to share, but we will send that follow-up email. And we only have 2 more minutes, but I have a question here that it's very much, we can't tell the future, but it's very much a great question to end the session, maybe with some final thoughts from each of you. With the rise of AI, what do you think the future of universities will be? This is a very personal question. We can't see the future, but a few lines I think will end the session nicely. You want to go first, Mazi?
Yeah. I've thought about this. I'm going to show you my hope. As you said, I can't foresee the future, but I can show you my hope for futures. I think universities are a place for people to learn life skills. Some of them are knowledge that we need, and some of them are human skills that we need. And I think with a lot of these tools helping us become better at knowing things, universities can lean into creating better humans, more ethical, more moral, more compassionate, And those are some of the skills that we may not be able to outsource to AI very rapidly. So that's where my hope is that where university needs to go.
Kyle, 30 seconds.
30 seconds. This is not a 30-second question. I think we might move to a model where universities kind of go back to this apprentice type model almost. And apprentice isn't the right word, but it's kind of smaller tutoring sessions where it's not course exam, but smaller settings where students can build projects and stuff. That's the very short answer.
Thank you so much. As I said, you can interact with Mazi and with Kyle over social media. They're more than open to getting questions. Thank you so much for joining us. Remember, this is only the first one of our AI series, Case Teaching in the Age of AI series. We have 2 more webinars coming in the following months. So stay tuned for more information on social media. Thank you so much, Violetta, for moderating. That was wonderful. And thank you all of you for being here. Have a great rest of the day or evening, depending on where you are in the world. Thank you. See you next time.
See you. Bye.